Imagine spending the entire offseason preparing for what everyone agreed would be the biggest year in the history of women's basketball. The ratings are exploding. The arenas are sold out months in advance. Every major sports network has clear primetime slots just to talk about your next game. Every sneaker brand on the planet is fighting for your signature. The entire sports world is locked in. And then, in the cruelest twist imaginable, your body just stops cooperating. That is the brutal, unfiltered reality of what Caitlin Clark lived through during the 2025 WNBA season. She played 13 games, 13 out of 41. The most talked about athlete in women's sports history. The player who single-handedly dragged the WNBA into primetime television. The woman who shattered every attendance and viewership record this league had ever seen. Spent the majority of her second professional season watching from the bench, dressed in street clothes, fighting a war that had absolutely nothing to do with basketball. And here's the part that nobody is fully talking about. While Caitlin was sidelined, while the media was busy mourning the season that should have been, something extraordinary happened inside the Indiana Fever organization. Something that quietly rewrote the story of this franchise forever. If you've been sleeping on this whole situation, you need to wake up right now. Because what unfolded in 2025 and what is now building toward the 2026 WNBA season is the most compelling storyline in women's sports today. Stick around, because by the end of this, you're going to see the Indiana Fever in a completely different light.
Out there on that court at all times, Lexie Hall took to Sophie Cunningham's Show Me Something podcast, and she addressed the truth about being a part of Caitlin Clark's team. And make no mistake about it, Lexie Hall wants to stay. Lexie Hall wants to stay, guys. She does not want to go anywhere. She is looking to return to Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever. We got to break this.
And before we get into it, if you're new here and you love deep basketball content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button right now. You do not want to miss what is coming as this 2026 season approaches. Let's go back to where this story really begins. After the absolute seismic eruption that was Caitlin Clark's 2024 rookie season, the expectations heading into 2025 were not just high. They were suffocating. Think about what she had already done as a rookie. She led the entire WNBA in assists. She led the league in three-pointers made. She broke the rookie scoring record. She won Rookie of the Year in one of the most dominant first seasons any player had ever produced in this league. More importantly, she made the WNBA must-see television. Arenas across the country that had operated at half capacity for years were suddenly selling out weeks in advance. Television viewership numbers tripled. Merchandise flew off the shelves.
2,000 people in an empty gym to now every game is sold out at 18,000 plus every single night, home and away. That is a big, big change. Lexie Hall felt that change immediately.
It might be. It might be.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's hard. I think like once you start winning and once more people start showing up, like your experience changes.
Ticket prices for Indiana Fever games were reaching levels previously unimaginable for any women's sporting event. But here's the thing about that level of transformation. It does not come without a cost. The pressure on Caitlin Clark heading into 2025 was unlike anything any player in this league had ever experienced. The entire world was not just watching. They were dissecting every shot selection, every defensive effort, every single interview, every facial expression on the bench after a bad call, every detail of her personal life. She had become larger than the sport itself, and that is a deeply uncomfortable place to exist as a 22-year-old professional basketball player. The coaching staff, the front office, and her teammates all understood the assignment.
But when you have players that are going to go take the charge, like you're just so tough and they're just like, people appreciate it. And when you have sold out crowds everywhere you go, it's just appreciated. It feels good as players.
Now, let's be real here. Would anybody be checking for Lexie Hall had she not been Caitlin Clark's teammate? Now, we love Lexie Hall. We want her here to stay. But that goes to show the value.
Head coach Stephanie White came back to Indiana to build on what they had started together. New pieces were added to the roster to create more balance around their superstar. There was genuine optimism inside that locker room. The pieces were in place for something historic. And then May arrived, and everything fell apart. The injury spiral that nobody saw coming. Caitlin Clark opened the 2025 WNBA season looking like a different player. She was sharper, more physical. Her court vision, already elite, looked even more refined. There was an aggression to her game that felt new and exciting. The Fever came out of the gates fast, and the hype machine was running at full power. Then, late in May, the first injury hit, a strain in her left quadriceps. It was described as minor. It was supposed to be a brief absence. Nobody panicked. Clark rested, worked with the medical staff, and came back mid-June. The Fever stabilized. Things looked good again. But the basketball gods were not done. A left groin injury surfaced in late June. Then, just when she had fought back from that, a completely separate right groin strain emerged in July. 3 different injuries, 3 different areas of the lower body, all within the span of roughly 10 weeks. Her body was sending a message that the relentless schedule, the pressure, and the accumulated workload had taken a toll that could not simply be pushed through. What makes this timeline even more painful is the specific moments she missed. On July 1st, the Indiana Fever won the WNBA Commissioner's Cup against the Minnesota Lynx, 74-59, the mid-season championship. And Caitlin Clark was not on the court. She watched her teammates celebrate a trophy she had helped build toward, and she could not be part of the on-court moment. Then came the All-Star Game, hosted in Indianapolis, in her home building, Gainbridge Fieldhouse, the very arena where the Indiana Fever play every home game. Caitlin Clark had been named a captain. The entire event was essentially built around her presence, and she had to sit that one out too. By early September, the Fever made it official. Clark would not return for the final stretch of the regular season or the playoffs. She appeared in just 13 games total, sidelined for nearly 2/3 of Indiana's entire schedule. The announcement came through a social media post, direct and honest, the way Clark always communicates. She wrote that she had hoped to share a better update, that she had spent hours in the gym every single day with one goal, getting back out there. That disappointed was not a big enough word. She also thanked everyone who had her back through all the uncertainty. That last line, that one hits differently when you understand the full picture of what was happening in that locker room.
Wanted to reach for. And I feel like now with the social media and just even like TV and the accessibility for people, like they see us and they can actually like have these dreams so much earlier. And to be one of those people is really special.
She going to games. Let's be real. Lexie Hull's first however many years in the league prior to Caitlin getting there, do you think she ever looked in the stands and saw anybody wearing a number 10 Lexie Hull jersey that wasn't a family member? No.
The mental battle behind the scenes. People talk a lot about what Caitlin Clark means for the WNBA from a business perspective. The tickets, the ratings, the sponsorships, the cultural explosion. And all of that is real and undeniable. But what happened in 2025 was a reminder that beneath all of it, there's a human being navigating something incredibly difficult. There was a moment during a July game against the Connecticut Sun that captured everything. Clark was on the court, testing her right groin in the final minutes. She collided with a basket stanchion. She made her way to the bench, and sitting there, clearly fighting to keep herself composed, she looked like someone who already understood the season might be over. In her own words, the nagging injuries played with her mind. That is not a throwaway line. When you keep trying to come back and your body keeps breaking down, the psychological weight of that becomes enormous. You start to question everything. Your preparation, your body, your timeline, whether the next return attempt will just create another setback. She said she spent hours every single day in the gym, not weeks, not a couple of sessions here and there. Hours, every day, working toward a return that kept getting pushed further back, doing everything right, and still not getting the outcome she was working for. That kind of sustained frustration is genuinely brutal to carry, especially while the whole sports world is watching and speculating, and in some corners, being anything but kind about it. Hot takes about whether she was being protected too carefully. Arguments about whether the team, should push her harder, all of it missing the point entirely. What those takes completely ignored was what was actually happening on the floor without her. The Fever refused to fold. Here is the most underreported story of the entire 2025 WNBA season. The Indiana Fever, without Caitlin Clark for nearly 2/3 of their schedule, did not crumble. They did not spiral. They did not become the cautionary tale everyone expected. They became something else entirely. Kelsey Mitchell had the finest individual season of her career. A legitimate veteran scorer who had always been respected around the league, but had rarely been at the center of national conversations. Mitchell stepped into the largest role of her professional life and absolutely delivered. She was named All-WNBA first team at the end of the season. She set a franchise record for points in a single game. She reached 669 career three-pointers, placing her in the top 10 in WNBA history all time. She had more 30-point performances than any other player in the league. Let that land for a second. The same player who spent years being described as a solid complementary piece next to a generational talent proved in 2025 that she's a genuine star in her own right, not a supporting actor. A leading force capable of taking over games on any given night. And then there is Aaliyah Boston. Boston, the dominant interior presence who had already established herself as one of the most complete forwards in the game, took everything to another level in 2025. All-WNBA second team, all-defensive team. In a single season, she ranked in the top 10 across the entire league for total rebounds, defensive rebounds, offensive rebounds, double-doubles, steals, and blocks. Also top 15 in points and assists. That is not a role player. That is one of the most valuable two-way players in all of women's basketball, performing at a level that frankly did not always make national headlines, but absolutely decided the outcome of games every single night. Together, Mitchell and Boston carried the Indiana Fever to the Commissioner's Cup title on July 1st without their franchise point guard. They won that trophy, split that $500,000 prize, and raised that hardware in front of a sold-out crowd. Without the player the sports world had spent a year insisting the entire franchise depended on. That is not a knock on Clark. That is the single most important development possible for a team with championship ambitions. Because the franchises that actually win championships are never one-player operations. They are ecosystems. And Indianapolis quietly built exactly that in 2025. The Fever finished as the 8th seed in the playoffs, with 13 games from their best player. Think carefully about where this team would have finished with a healthy Clark running the offense for a full 41-game schedule. The ceiling of this roster is genuinely alarming for the rest of this league. But as the season closed out, an entirely different war was brewing. One that threatened to overshadow everything on the basketball side. The CBA war that shook the entire league. Here is something most casual fans still do not fully grasp. Caitlin Clark, the most recognizable face in women's basketball, the player who drove a multi-billion-dollar surge in WNBA revenue, the athlete whose presence alone tripled television viewership and sent ticket prices to levels this sport had never seen, made $78,000 in the 2025 WNBA season. $78,000. She had signed a 4-year rookie contract worth $338,000 total after being selected first overall in the 2024 draft. That is the standard structure for a first overall pick. But when you hold that number against what Clark was actually generating for the league, the gap between her compensation and her real-world value to the sport was absolutely staggering. And this was not just a Caitlin Clark issue. It was a league-wide problem. The WNBA had grown faster in 2 years than anyone in the sport had anticipated. And the players who built that growth were still being paid on a scale completely disconnected from the new reality. By late 2025 and into early 2026, the standoff between the WNBA and the WNBA Players Association reached a breaking point. Negotiations for a new collective bargaining agreement had stalled completely. Players publicly accused the league of not taking the process seriously. The union gave its members the green light to strike if a deal could not be reached. Some of the most prominent players in the league said directly that they were prepared to sit out the entire 2026 season. Free agency froze. The draft was put on hold. Teams could not make roster moves. The machinery of the entire offseason ground to a halt. The 2026 season, set to begin on May 8th, was in genuine jeopardy. And right in the middle of all of this noise, Caitlin Clark made her debut as an analyst on NBA on NBC. Sitting in that studio, composed and professional, she said she was confident a deal would get done. She expressed belief in both sides, finding common ground. She was the calming voice in a situation that had every reason to spiral further. At a moment when publicly venting frustration about being paid $78,000 while generating hundreds of millions in value would have been completely understandable, she chose to lead. That tells you everything about who she is. The new collective bargaining agreement was reached in March 2026. With Commissioner Kathy Engelbert confirming a verbal deal had been struck. The financial terms reshaped the landscape of the sport. Under the new CBA, Clark's salary for 2026 will jump from a projected $85,000 to approximately $530,000. A provision in the deal allows players on rookie contracts who have been named All-WNBA first or second team to renegotiate their fourth-year salary to the current max for that season. By 2027, Clark could be earning a projected max of $1.3 million. And if she earns MVP honors, a supermax deal could push that number to $1.7 million by 2028. This is more than a pay raise. This is the WNBA acknowledging, in contract language, that its stars deserve to be paid like stars. The players were prepared to sacrifice an entire season to make that happen. They won, with the labor battle resolved and a historic new deal in place. There was only one story left to tell, the one the entire basketball world had been waiting for since September 4th, 2025. The comeback the world was waiting for. March 2026, FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying. Team USA. 8 months after her season ended while sitting on a bench with tears in her eyes and a social media post telling the world she was not ready to give up, Caitlin Clark put on a basketball jersey again. Not for a workout, not for a press appearance, for competitive basketball representing the United States of America. The question everyone had was simple. Was she actually back, fully herself, not just functional, not just healthy enough to be on the floor, but the player who could drop a logo three before a defense even set up? The player who could thread a no-look pass through a double team and make it look effortless? That player. The answer came clearly on the court. She scored. She performed. She looked sharp. The reports from everyone around the program were not cautiously optimistic. They were enthusiastic. 8 months of obsessive preparation does not just repair a body. It sharpens everything else. Her footwork, her conditioning, her shot rhythm, her reads. Clark has talked about spending hours every single day in the gym during her recovery. That level of commitment over that length of time creates a version of a player that is genuinely difficult to prepare for, because they have had the rare gift of sustained, focused improvement without the interruption of a game schedule. She is not returning to recapture what she had before. She is returning with something new. In the Indiana Fever roster, she is walking back and has also changed in ways that make this entire picture even more compelling. 2026, the most dangerous version of Indiana. Let us walk through exactly what the Indiana Fever are bringing into the 2026 WNBA season, because the complete picture here is genuinely alarming for every other team in this league. Caitlin Clark is returning from an 8-month layoff that she used to get sharper, more focused, and more motivated than she has ever been in her professional career. A player who in just 13 games still commanded more national media coverage than anyone else in women's basketball. A player whose gravitational pull forces defenses to completely alter their approach the moment she crosses half court. And now she is healthy, she is hungry, and she has something to prove. Kelsey Mitchell just had the best individual season of her career and earned all WNBA first team recognition. She is not coming into 2026 as a complimentary piece. She is coming in as a proven star who has already carried this team through its hardest stretch. Her confidence level is different now. Her place in the league's hierarchy is different. Defenses cannot ignore her anymore. Aaliyah Boston was all WNBA's second team and all defensive team in the same season. She is quite possibly the most undervalued dominant player in the entire sport right now. Everything a championship team needs from its front court, rebounding, defending, playmaking, competing, she provides every single night. And the supporting pieces around those three have been forged in the most intense pressure environment women's basketball has ever seen. These are not players still figuring out who they are. They know exactly how to perform when the entire world is watching. That experience is not something you can manufacture or buy. It has to be lived through, and the Indiana Fever lived through it together. Now layer in the broader context. The 2026 WNBA season is the league's 30th anniversary campaign. Two new franchises are entering the picture: the Portland Fire and the Toronto Tempo. New markets, new fan bases, more games on the schedule, more eyes on the sport. The new collective bargaining agreement means players across the entire roster are better compensated, more invested, and competing in a league that is finally acknowledging their real value. The competition will be fierce. Teams across the league spent this offseason rebuilding around the new financial reality. The gap between the elite and the rest is tighter than it has been in years. But the Indiana Fever have an advantage no other team can replicate. They already know how to win without their best player. They have the hardware to prove it. That is the most powerful thing a team can carry into a season. Proof. When Clark dribbles up the court on May 8th for the first regular season game of her third professional season, every opposing coaching staff in this league is going to feel something they have not quite felt before. They know what she can do individually. They've spent 2 years constructing game plans designed to contain her. But now they also have to account for a Mitchell who can drop 30 on any given night, and a Boston who might be the most complete two-way forward in the sport. There is no clean defensive solution to this Indiana Fever team, and that is exactly what makes them so dangerous. The bigger picture everyone is missing. There's one more layer here that never gets the attention it deserves, and it might be the most important layer of all. In 2024, every conversation about the Indiana Fever started and ended with Caitlin Clark. She was the sun. Everyone else was orbiting. The media could not cover this team without centering every single thing around number 22. And while Clark absolutely earned every bit of that attention based on what she was producing on the court, the framing built a dangerous assumption into the public's understanding of this franchise: that it rises or falls entirely on one player. 2025 dismantled that assumption completely. The Fever adapted without their superstar. They competed without her. They won a mid-season championship without her. They developed players who emerged from that crucible as genuine stars. They built a collective identity that exists independent of any single name on a roster. That is not a small thing. That is the entire foundation of a championship-caliber organization. And Caitlin Clark watched all of it. She watched Kelsey Mitchell become something the league had not seen before. She watched Aaliyah Boston dominate in ways that rarely made the viral highlight packages, but absolutely decided the outcomes of games. She watched from the sideline and understood something deeply important about the team she is returning to. She is not walking back into a team that needs her to carry everything on her back. She is walking into a team that already proved it can stand on its own. And when she is on the floor, healthy and fully engaged, the weight is shared, the pressure is distributed, and the ceiling of this group moves to a place this franchise has never reached. Caitlin Clark acknowledged it herself after the season ended. She thanked the people who had her back through all the uncertainty. She saw what her teammates did. And that mutual recognition of each other's value is exactly the kind of locker room foundation that championship teams are built on. So here's the real truth about what the 2025 WNBA season actually was. The media narrative called it a disappointment, an injured star, a season derailed, a franchise setback. But if you track the details instead of just reading the headlines, 2025 was the single most important developmental season in Indiana Fever history. The supporting cast became the main cast and delivered at the highest level. The franchise's depth and character were tested under conditions no one would have chosen and came out stronger on the other side. And Caitlin Clark used every painful day of that 8-month recovery to return as a player this league simply is not ready to handle. She stepped back onto the court with Team USA in March 2026 and looked like herself again, sharper if the people around the program are to be believed. 8 months of relentless, focused work does not just repair a body. It deepens a hunger that is genuinely difficult to simulate any other way. The 2026 WNBA season begins on May 8th. New teams, new money, a new collective bargaining agreement that finally begins to pay these athletes what they are actually worth. A league growing faster than anyone in the sport could have imagined. 2 new franchises stepping onto the stage for the very first time. In Indianapolis, returning to the locker room, she left in September with a message to the world that she was not done yet. Caitlin Clark is back. The Indiana Fever that the sports world spent 2 years treating as a one-player operation just showed everyone there's something far more difficult to stop than that. Now, add a fully healthy Caitlin Clark back into the equation. Add the motivation of a player who spent 8 months watching from the sideline. Add the teammates who prove they can win without her. Add the new financial framework that has every player in that locker room more invested than ever before. The rest of the WNBA had 2025 to make up ground. Some of them used it well. Good for them, because on May 8th, that window closes. And what walks through the door in Indianapolis is the most complete, most motivated, most dangerous version of this franchise that has ever existed. You have been warned. And if you got value from this deep dive today, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment below with your prediction for how far the Indiana Fever go in 2026. And make sure you're subscribed. This season is about to give us more to talk about than any WNBA season in history. And you do not want to be the last one to know.